Cafe, where the SHA thoughts find that and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. She's a parenting educator, author, and of course, advocating techniques quickly to stop parents from yelling at their kids so that they will listen rather than me, Sue Donnellan.
Hi.
Welcome, Miss Sue. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I
Yeah, certainly. I am a parenting coach and a parent. I'm a mom of four, including triplets, an entrepreneur, and I'm a parenting strategist. So I do help other parents with ways of solving some of their typical, very stressful parenting problems.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Sue. Thank you. And today let's talk about digging out of social media, phone, gaming avalanche, how to bring balance. So tell us, Miss Sue, how to balance.
Well, that is a bit of a loaded question, but where I begin when I'm coaching parents is to m- put into place my earned access plan, which is parenting sort of upfront. So if you're talking about gaming or you're talking about phone use or screen use, what you want to do is before it becomes a problem and it's overtaking the child and their time, what you really want to be able to do is parent that upfront. So what you do is you set guidelines in place upfront. Say for the phone, before you even give your first phone over to the kids, what you do is you set expectations and you give the phone to the child with a purpose. So it's a business decision. It's not just something that they get because all their friends have that. So you're setting the guidelines, you're signing a contract with the kids, you're before you get the gaming console, before you do anything with the kids that can become out of control, what we do is we parent that upfront. We try to do that first and set the guidelines and the expectations so that we can always dial it back. But it's an earned access. So they have to give something to get something. And we structure our communication and our conversations up front and bake in the accountability before it becomes a problem. And if it's already become a problem, we can still dial that back.
I like that, Miss Sue. Give and take for sure. Beyond just dopamine, what is the specific psychological design to trick that you find most people are unaware of, which makes these apps and games so incredibly difficult to put down?
What's the question? What
Yes,
I
when the people or when your children's addicted to any kind of app on their cell phone, what is the trick that you can say they can stop without uh forcing them?
Okay, so what we want to do is we have a multi-pronged process that we talk about with parents. So depending on the situation that they're in, if the child is already really addicted to the screen and really getting that dopamine hit, what we have to do is start planning ways to keep the kids productively busy. So that's our job as a parent to either, depending on their age, have the expectation that they get a job, make sure they're either doing a sport or playing an instrument or some other activity, learning a language, whatever it is, that we want to create and curate the environment in the home so that the kids are busy doing productive things. We don't allow them unfettered time sitting in the room where they're getting that dopamine hit and where they're not active and they're not engaging with other kids or bosses or coaches or whatever. So what we really want to do is before we get to the point of the dopamine hit with the screens and the phones and all of that, we want to have a plan in place so that the kids are productively busy. In our case, we had four kids. We always had the expectation you have a job, you do a sport, or like I said, an instrument, and we're making sure that they're creating that balance in their life, but they're not going to do that innately on their own. So creating that balance in their life is something that I have to expect, communicate, train, teach, and do. So when
Mhm.
we're parenting to that level, it's going to be more work for us. But if a parent wants to just do what I call remote control parenting from the couch and allow the TV or the games or the dopamine hits to do the parenting because they don't want to be involved every day, then that is the situation they're going to get. You have to be involved. You have to be creating situations where you're driving them here and there and you're teaching them, building the resume, getting them out to go and interview for jobs, even if it's at a restaurant as a busser. They're earning their own money. These are all things that we can do to set the child up for success in life.
Miss Sue, in your experience, what are the most common emotional states or unmet needs that people are trying to medicate with the endless scrolling and gaming?
With the endless what?
With the endless that people trying to medicate with their scrolling and gaming.
Well, medicate, what I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're asking. The medication versus what? The gaming or
Yeah,
we
both.
we are leaning toward medication and therapy.
Yes.
So there's a tremendous amount of that happening. For one thing, even as a young, starting from when kids are young, I noticed even 15 years ago when my kids were young, we have three boys and one girl. The one thing that I did notice was that boys have a lot of energy. They just do naturally.
Yes.
They're very active. They're very tactile. They want to break it. They want to jump from it. They want to hang from it. They want to see if it bounces. These are just normal boy behaviors that are really getting kind of suppressed, and they have been for a long time. This isn't new. This has been going on for a long time. And I noticed that because I have one daughter and the three boys, I could see that my daughter girls just sort of on their own sit. They're quiet. They're just not they're not driven by that same desire to be tactile. So I did notice that I had to be quite the advocate for our sons when they were younger. They just had that energy. But I will say that as parents, um, gaming and watching a lot of TV wasn't as big of a deal back, 15, 20 years ago. But right now, it's very easy to keep the kids busy. So it's a tempting thing for parents to do. However, what I noticed is that, especially for boys, they have a real need to be moving and creating and exploring. And for every hour that my child was sitting in front of a TV, there was a back end of a need for him to be active for 2 hours. And of course, this isn't a scientific fact, but with my oldest, who is very much a typical boy, and I was pregnant with the triplets, um, I was a little bit more, I had to sit down, I had to take my load off, I had to take a nap, I had to be resting. So my 2-year-old boy was very active and I needed him to just sort of sit still for me. So he was watching TV more often than I normally would have allowed. And I noticed, I mean, it was very clear at 2.5 years old, the more I put him in front of the TV for every half hour to an hour, on the back end, I had a ton of anxious energy that he needed to get out. And yet when these kids are young and being given pads and screens to be busy and occupied for a tremendous amount of many hours in their day, there is a backlash to that. And therefore, I'm talking to parents about, we've got to get up off the couch. We've got to do the hard work. Our kids are depending on us to be the parent that gets up off the couch and says, this is what no touch looks like. This is what, cleaning a house looks like. This is what relationship building and having friends over and play dates. This is what this looks like. If we find ourselves resorting to the easy path, we are doing harm to our child. And it's just a matter of when it comes to light. So by the time your child's a teenager, if you're upset that he's got the dopamine hits and the addiction to the screens, we have to ask ourselves, what part did we play? And then we have to figure out, okay, so now how are we going to deal with where we're at right now? And I do have, like we talked earlier, a lot of tips and tricks and ways to sort of reverse that.
Miss Sue, for someone feeling completely overwhelmed and addicted, what is the smallest, most manageable first step they can take to just create a moment of awareness in their day?
Well, I think again, you have to ask first, you have to have goals. So usually if a parent comes to me completely overwhelmed, what we do is we talk about the big picture. Wisdom in any situation lies in the big picture. We must zoom out. We must look at our goals. And if we have a child 17 or 10, or the parent is afraid that he's not engaging in school, or they're too addicted to the dopamine of the hit of the screen and the gaming, and they can't get it to stop, we have to first take ownership of our part in that. We're paying for it, we bought it, we brought it into the home. So now we need to take stock of the decisions that we made that have led us here. Once we take accountability that we made the decisions and that we can reverse it, then what we do is we work from there. And we depends on the age of the child, how far along they are, but everything is possible, everything is reversible, everything there's always a way to create that trusted relationship with your child. It's going to hurt a little bit, they're going to go through some transition, and it won't be easy. But that's why with the coaching that I do, I talk a lot about leadership parenting, and our children depend on us to be a leader.
What are the top three daily triggers that lead to mindless scrolling, Miss Sue?
What are the three daily what?
Daily triggers
Oh, triggers that lead to
that mindless scrolling.
the three daily triggers that lead to mindless.
Mindless
Uh-huh.
scrolling. What do
Um,
you think?
I'm not sure I really understand that question. The three triggers.
Let's say your kids went to scroll their phone and then suddenly they saw this game app that okay, I'm gonna try this. So it triggered them to just stay them for the whole day.
Well, again, I come back to the fact that we cannot be dependent upon what our children are taking in externally. So as a parent, we have to cultivate that inner knowing, that inner knowledge. We have to teach our kids how to connect with their gut, how to connect with their instincts, how to read a room. There's certain my tagline for my business is parenting skills for life. And we have to ask ourselves, is scrolling on a phone and on gaming sites and on YouTube, are we creating and teaching and instilling any skills for life? So if our child is spending this amount of time and many hours, and we're starting to see they're either depressed, or they're not working out, their body is sort of atrophying, whatever the case is, wherever you're at, if you're finding yourself in a situation where you're seeing that it's gotten out of control and out of balance, there's always ways to kind of bring that back. But again, we have to really get involved in their lives. We have to build the trust with them so that they share with us their thoughts and feelings. We have to make sure we're always aware of what our children are consuming. And instead of putting a reliance on consuming external things that other people have written and designed, instead of allowing that in, that's like a bad diet, right? That's like going out and eating, fast food every day. We don't want to rely on what other people have decided I should consume. And that's what scrolling and external factors are doing, whether it's TV shows, cartoons, whatever it is. What we want to do as parents, we want to teach our kids to connect with what's inside. How do you feel? What do you think about that? What are your goals? What makes you add value to this world? What do you think you want to do when you grow older? And then help them kind of curate that and help them discover what their purpose and passion is in life, so that they don't wake up as a teenager and not have a desire to go to college and not have a desire to have a career. We hear parents talking about how their kids won't leave the house or whatever, but these are kids who were not invested in to find where they add value in the world. They weren't invested in to find jobs and to create relationships and to find what is going to make them happy in a career in life. So those are some of the big conversations, the zoomed out conversations that we have when we start coaching.
Mister, can you explain more about the phrase on your website? Stop yelling and power struggles get kids to listen.
Yes, because I was a yeller, and I am a reformed yeller. When we had our first baby, and then I ended up with triplets when I was trying to have my second baby. So I went from 1 to 4 kids overnight. I was very overwhelmed. I was tired, exhausted, and I was yelling. And I had to learn through studying behavioral psychology and Montessori. We had our kids at a Montessori school at the time. I had to learn how to reach my kids and how to get them to do what I needed them to do without yelling. Because my oldest, every time I yelled, was just glossing over, and he was just looking at me like, the more you yell, the less I hear. And I had to decide and discover ways to get through to my child and understand how to get him motivated. And that's what I've spent the last 25 years doing. So the secrets to just stop yelling and getting kids to listen lies within what I mentioned in the beginning of parenting in advance. Breaking patterns, understanding what makes me yell, taking ownership for what makes me yell. In other words, am I staying up until midnight and I'm exhausted and I'm not getting the rest I need? So now I'm triggered in the morning and I'm really angry. What can I do to make sure that I'm a little bit more calm in the morning? And then from there, how do we structure our communication with our kids so that we know how to build in accountability? Again, it's that earned access method that I teach, which is you don't just get access to things, you have to earn it. When you do this, then you get this. It's restructuring our parenting in advance.
Well, thank you for that tips, Miss Sue. And how about your book? Can you explain to us?
My book, Secrets to Parenting Without Giving an F, is something that came out of um, me being a type A personality and a business owner, and very much do it because I said and be happy that I asked. um, I when I did study the behavioral psychology and I did study the Montessori practices, which kind of builds the accountability and respect into my kids early so that they would be independent and make their own decisions and have their own consequences. I had to learn how to structure my home so that those things would happen and I would stop yelling. But as I learned to let go of control and allow life to happen for my kids, I realized that there was a very healthy, intentional detachment process that I needed to go through to get to the other side of allowing my kids to learn on their own, and to take accountability and take that risk and leap in their own lives. I couldn't be involved in solving every problem for them. And that was something I had to learn. And honestly, that's why we yell. We're yelling because we're controlling and they're not doing what we want when we want them to do it. And I had to go through that and I had to learn. So that was why I wrote the book, because it's parenting without giving, a fuck. Is that it's a tongue-in-cheek way of saying we need to intentionally detach. We need to learn how to show our kids respect and have them learn their own logical consequences. And as my kids became teenagers, I noticed that the fear set in with other parents, that they were really controlling and punishing and taking keys away and taking privileges away. At the time, I was really releasing and allowing my kids to make their own decisions. And that was just based on the trust and the respect that we had built in the years before.
Interesting book, Miss Sue. And how about your podcast? Ask Mom ADHD Moments Explained.
Yep, I just recently started my podcast, Ask Mom Parenting, on YouTube. And my most recent episode is the ADHD, where we talk about, in my coaching practice, many parents have asked, if I have a child with ADHD, when do I connect and when do I correct? In other words, ADHD behavior is a little bit more strenuous for parents. It's not the neurotypical, whereas if you're giving your kids a lesson on something, they're going to not melt down if it's a neurotypical child. ADHD kids are not as regulated. So therefore, the parents with kids with ADHD often ask me, how do I know if it's ADHD behavior or whether it's just normal behavior that I have to parent and correct? So that particular podcast goes through all of the different ways to determine whether the child is behaving in an ADHD way and whether they need extra connection prior to the correction, or whether you can tell based on these symptoms and based on this behavior, whether the child needs to be held accountable and told, nope, we're leaving right now. This is what we talked about. So anyway, that's what that podcast is all about.
And Miss Sue, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So can you please invite our listeners to support your podcast, your book, or your advocacy, or any projects that you're doing right now?
Sure. I would love for you to come to askmomparenting.com and sign up for my my newsletter, or join my free podcast group. I'm sorry, my free Facebook group, or go to YouTube and look up Ask Mom Parenting and subscribe to my channel.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Sue Donnellan, because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering episodes of the podcast itself, more and more empowering books, and for sure, more and more empowering advocacy to come. So, Miss Sue, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Welcome, people. See you soon.